Lovely. So welcome everybody. I'm Nicola Goodberry-Keneally and I'm the CEO of Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire. Really lovely to see so many of you join us this evening for our smoking cessation event. So we're co-hosting the event with West Yorkshire ICB. So I've got many of the team here to support me this evening. So thank you for that. So we'll make a start if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So thank you for all joining. I know it's really challenging after a full day at work, isn't it? I know you'll all have had a really busy day in your pharmacies, and it's a lot on an evening to be coming to outside of work events. So once again, just a real massive thank you. It really is appreciated. And we're going to talk this evening about one of the newer NHS advanced services, which is the smoking cessation service. So we've put this event on to try to support you guys in terms of how you can make this service a success within your community pharmacies. So the NHS trusts within West Yorkshire are actively in the process of setting up referrals for the service at the moment. We've got 3 trusts already live and making referrals to community pharmacies. And it's expected that all 8 trusts will be live by November this year. So that's a lot more coming on board, and it means we've got to do quite a bit of work to be ready to be accepting those patients. So in terms of the event this evening, we're going to do a bit of an introduction to what the service is, why it's important in terms of morbidity and mortality in terms of smoking. We're going to be talking about how it would reduce health inequalities. And we're going to then look at the patient journey with the service, from the patients being in the trust as an inpatient and then referred into a community pharmacy via discharge, and what the community pharmacy can then do to support the patient. There's also going to be lots of key information and resources which will hopefully help you with delivering this service in your pharmacies. There will be an opportunity to ask some questions as we go through. There is quite a lot of content this evening, guys, so I would ask you to put it in the chat, and then as we go, if we can answer the question in the chat, we will. But what we'll do is we'll try and summarize some of the questions towards the end in a question and answer session and see how many we can cover at that point, if that's okay. So in terms of agenda, everybody that's taking part this evening is going to do themselves a proper introduction as they start their session. So quickly, there's going to be Ruth and myself, Sally and Joanna and Steve. So we're going to do an introduction to the smoking service. We're then going to look at things from a trust perspective. We're then going to talk about the service in terms of how it should be provided. We're going to look at some feedback in terms of how the service is currently running for those pharmacies that are already receiving referrals, what's going well, and maybe some top tips of what we can do better to make sure that we deliver a brilliant service. And then we've got some slides on resources and things that you might find useful going forwards. We will share all these slides, so don't worry about writing too much things down, and all the links and things like that will be available later, and we will also put them on our website, so you can refer to those at a later date. So to start us off with the smoking cessation service, we've got an introduction, and I'll hand over to Ruth.
Thank you very much, Nicola, and good evening, everybody. I'm Ruth Buchan. I'm the Community Pharmacy Clinical Lead at West Yorkshire ICB. So a bit of background as to why we've got the Stop Smoking service as an advanced service in community pharmacy. So, oops.
Sorry, Ruth.
That's fine. As we know, tobacco is a single cause of preventable death, disability, illness, and social inequalities. And I think it's really a stark statistic that 1 in 2 smokers die prematurely due to smoking. The NHS has got a real clear commitment as to how we're going to improve and tackle avoidable illness, including tobacco. Now, I'm not going to go into that anymore because Joanna Feeney, who's going to join us as part of this event later on, has got, you can be much more eloquent about really what the plans are and also the impact of tobacco. So I'll leave that to Joanna. But the stop smoking service, advanced service and community pharmacy really helps open up and allows the NHS Trust to refer patients to community pharmacy. So people who have stopped whilst they're in the hospital can continue their quit and be supported by the community pharmacy in their community pharmacy, often by people they know. And we want to do that so we can increase the capacity for stop smoking and supporting people. Importantly, to reduce that mobility and mortality. And I think really key as well is about using those skills of the pharmacy team. And we're seeing more and more clinical services come to community pharmacy, and this is just one of them. So that's the background to the service. Back to you, Nicola.
Thank you. So why is this service so important? So within West Yorkshire, 13.8% of adults smoke. This equates to 252,000 people. It's estimated that the smoking costs West Yorkshire ICB 650, I knew I'd get my numbers wrong, 658.7 million. And these costs are accrued in the below areas. So we've got a massive impact on productivity with 516.4 million, 77.5 million to healthcare costs, the social care costs at 48.1 million, and then a real sad statistic of 81 smoking related fires each year, which cost the fire service 16.8 million. So these are the financial reasons why we would really try to encourage people to stop smoking. So the current methods we've got within West Yorkshire to support people with stopping smoking. So two different routes that we're going to talk about. So this evening, we're talking about the hospital journey. So if you're in hospital now as an inpatient, you are offered a choice as you leave us if you want to attempt to quit smoking. So you could either do that through self-care, which is sort of the way that's always been available. We've now got a community pharmacy service, which is what we're here to talk about this evening. And then there obviously are the other local authority commission stop smoking services. People that haven't been in hospital, obviously the other ways that people can just decide at any point to give up smoking might be after an event in their life, or they might, New Year's resolution or something like that. Two different methods we've got to support. So there's the local authority commission stop smoking services, and then we've got the local authority commission services that are available through a community pharmacy. So the services in the pharmacy, if you want more information on that, is all on the Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire website, so do please have a little look. So the benefits of community pharmacies being involved in this service is it gives patients more choice. Obviously, we've got a lot of pharmacies on High Street, within health centres, things like that. We've got many, many community pharmacies across West Yorkshire and the nation. So lots of access for patients. It means there's additional capacity for patients for those services that might have been struggling to look after all our patients. And the access is fantastic. So a lot of people are really comfortable walking into a community pharmacy and asking for help and support because they're used to dealing with their local community pharmacy teams. Over to you, Steve.
I'll unmute myself. That was a very schoolboy error, wasn't it? I do apologise. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see such a fantastic turnout for this webinar this evening. My name's Steve King. I'm a pharmacist with Midlands and Lancashire Commissioning Support Unit. And if you're thinking, what is somebody from the Midlands and Lancashire team doing on a webinar in West Yorkshire? I'll explain that I'm actually part of a team commissioned by NHS England. And we have Rob Hebden, who's the national lead on the smoking cessation service from NHS England, with us tonight. Evening, Rob. We've been commissioned to support both trusts and the local systems to actually implement this service for referral out from secondary care to community pharmacy. So we support the trusts, the ICBs, the LPCs in particular, to actually get the pathways in place, set up the referral processes, and get trusts to a position where they can begin promoting the service and internally, and encouraging people to stop smoking and get help from a community pharmacy if that's their choice on discharge. And just looking at this map here and the key on the right-hand side, as Nicola said earlier, we hope to fairly swiftly get all 8 trusts within the ICB live. We're halfway there in that 4 of them are live and already making referrals, and certainly by November, Bradford Teaching and Mid York should also be providing the service, and the 2 mental health trusts hopefully will follow in the not too distant future. So you can see the location of those trusts, and those that are currently live and those that are still progressing, and depending on where your pharmacy is situated, that's important to you, particularly in terms of when you're likely to start receiving referrals. And obviously there will be comms going out to that effect. Could I have the next slide, please, Nicola? So I want to say a massive thank you at this point. It's absolutely incredible that a third of you community pharmacies in West Yorkshire have actually already signed up to provide this service. Hats off to you. We're in very challenging times in all areas of healthcare, so to have that level of support and enthusiasm to provide this service, I think just a huge thank you. 206 so far. You can see how they're located across the area. Obviously, there are some areas such as Wakefield where you're possibly not seeing that many referrals yet, but they will be coming. So please bear with us, please bear with the service. It's important to say that the majority of trusts, when they initiate the service, the numbers of referrals initially are likely to be quite low for a number of reasons. That actually does have some advantages, in that if there are teething troubles, and this is something we'll be touching on in a little while, if you're dealing with relatively low numbers, then hopefully the impact for both the patient and everybody involved in the system is minimised. So thank you so much. I'll hand over again to Ruth.
Thanks, Steve. So we're going to now go through the pathway that a patient follows really on their quit journey, and follow that and give you the information you need as to how each section of that happens. So we're going to start from when they're first identified as a smoker, when they're in the hospital, how the tobacco dependence treatment is initiated in the hospital with obviously with consent and by the tobacco dependency team. How they then choose what is going to happen to them next, how they're referred to the pharmacy, actually that community pharmacy process, and the post-event messaging and also claim process that you need to do as a pharmacy. So without much more ado, I'm going to pass over to Sally. So Sally, can you take us through the patient-inpatient pathway?
Yep. Good evening, everybody. So first of all, we're lucky to have my face. I had some technical issues, but I'm here. So hello, lovely. So I'm Sally Lee and I work for West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board, and I'm the current tobacco lead. So for the last 11 months, my primary focus has been supporting trusts across West Yorkshire to implement their tobacco dependency treatment service. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So what I'm going to do over the next 5 minutes or so is just give you a really brief overview of what that service is, what it includes, how we're doing as West Yorkshire, and some of them successes as well that we don't often share and celebrate. Next slide, please. So as part of the NHS long-term plan, hospital trusts are required to set out an opt-out in-house tobacco dependency service by March 2024. Now, what we mean by opt-out is that once that patient's identified as a smoker, they automatically go into that service unless the patient declines the support. Funding's been provided to help set these services up and will continue post-March 2024. For acute inpatients and mental health services, the funding that has been provided currently will cover 60% of inpatients identified as smokers. Just to give you that context, I think it was in the previous slide, we have 13 services across West Yorkshire, so we're a fairly large area. We've got 5 acute inpatient services, 5 maternity services and 3 mental health services. Now, I'm going to primarily focus on inpatient today, as the maternity don't qualify for the smoking cessation service, and this is purely down to the fact that the 12 weeks will be provided in-house with the midwives. So as you'll see below, I've just put together a quick table which highlights when the trust went live with their services and the trusts that are due to go live. So as you can see, we're not doing too bad, and as Steve highlighted, just a further 2 to go, hopefully in November. Just to home in a little bit on Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust, they were one of the first acute inpatients to launch in November last year, and they started making their referrals to community pharmacy in January, and I believe we've had upwards of 300 referrals so far, so pretty successful for Leeds in terms of that referrals. Yeah, next slide, please. So this here is just when Trust started with their services, they were given guidance and a recommended operational model. However, Trust were given that freedom to adapt that model, as we recognise that each trust's different, each have got their own constraints, and it needs to work for the trust, something that's going to be equitable, sustainable, and work for them. So all that we would require is that the trust follow their must-dos, and I'll just talk you through their must-dos now. So when a patient's admitted, they will be screened for their smoking status. Once they're identified, they'll be provided into an opt-out referral. They will then be given provisions of nicotine replacement therapy and any available pharmacotherapies, which I know we haven't got readily available at the moment, so we're very much relying on the nicotine replacement therapies. We also know in some of our trusts that they're also offering vapes as a provision now, and that's becoming a more popular choice for patients. After, they would be provided with ongoing support, and then upon discharge, they would have them 3 options. So again, self-care, your referral to community pharmacy, and to local authority stop smoking services. This is obviously down to patient choice and criteria, and that discussion will happen with the tobacco dependency advisor and the patient. And finally, the trust is then required to report that data back to NHS Digital. Next slide, please. Just talking about the data collection a little bit more in detail, trusts are required to submit data to NHS Digital on a monthly basis. This will be done in monthly arrears. For example, April's data will be submitted in June. The data includes 28-day outcome data. This triggers the submission for patients that engage with the in-house service. So it's really, really crucial once that patient care has been transferred to community pharmacy or to local authority stop smoking services, that trusts get that 28-day outcome back. And then what happens is the data gets submitted to NHS Digital, and it gets collated into a lovely dashboard, which you can see below. And again, I've just used Leeds as an example. So it's a really nice visual dashboard, easy to use. You can choose to filter it down into provider, ICB, region, and it gives all that really crucial data. And the idea obviously behind this data is, in layman terms, to check that the service is working, and we can check the progress of that. We can performance manage it, but also identify anticipated impacts on addressing health inequalities. Next slide, please. So I've just added this on the end, a little Brucey bonus. Like I said, we don't often celebrate our successes, and this poster was pulled together for a celebration event that NHS England hosted a few weeks ago. And this shows all the successes, some of the successes I should say, because they won't all be on here, over the last 2.5 years that we've managed to achieve in West Yorkshire ICB and our NHS hospital trusts. Just to give you a few examples of that, West Yorkshire ICB were one of the first to sign up to the smoke-free pledge and the government's ambition to make England smoke-free by 2030. We've got a very exciting event coming up tomorrow, so I'm literally going to be losing my hair by the end of the week, so I'll be presenting again tomorrow at our first West Yorkshire Tobacco Control Summit, and this will give partners across West Yorkshire the opportunity to come together and look at clean tobacco prevention. Also, we've had individual trusts that have managed to acquire, such as e-cig kits for patients that non-qualify. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. Joanna?
Thanks, everyone. So my name's Joanna Feeney. I'm the Clinical Delivery Manager for tobacco in the regional NHS team in the North East and Yorkshire. I'm hosted by the the North East Clinical Support Unit. And my role is to support the ICBs and trusts to implement the NHS long-term plan. So we've heard that tobacco, sorry, if we just go on to the next slide, we've heard that tobacco is the #1 risk factor for disease and death and disability in England. It shouldn't really surprise us. We know that it's the only product that, if it's used as it's intended to be used, will kill more than half of its long-term users. In every year in England, we've got over 70,000 people who die from a smoking-related death. And for every one person who dies from a smoking-related death, there's 30 people who are diagnosed and living with smoking-related conditions. This also results in around about 500,000 hospital-related, smoking-related hospital admissions every year. And smoking is one of the biggest drivers of health inequalities that we have. It accounts for around about 85% of the observed inequalities in life expectancy between the richest and poorest in society today. In addition to the impacts on the individuals and their families, smoking costs the NHS around about £2.6 billion every single year. And whilst smoking rates are decreasing, we still have 5 million people in England that are smoking. And we're actually predicted to miss the 2030 ambition that was set out by the government to reduce smoking rates to less than 5%. We're predicted to miss that by 9 years. And it'll be probably more than 20 years until we can get the most deprived in our society down to that 5%. So really, the NHS's interest is really about kind of how we can help reduce the harm from tobacco. If we can go on to the next slide. We've heard that the NHS long-term plan set out the contributions to achieve the smoke-free ambition, acknowledging that we had a responsibility to treat tobacco dependency. Ultimately, treating tobacco dependency will improve the lives of all patients in all pathways, from neonates all the way through to old age care, from maternity through to cancer treatments. Within the NHS, we actually have quite a unique opportunity to see smokers when they're at key teachable moments. They're away from their normal environment and they're receptive of hearing health-related information. And in addition to preventing ill health and disease, treating tobacco dependency is an effective treatment in itself for many of the conditions, and the impacts are immediate. The risk of somebody being admitted to hospital or being readmitted to hospital falls as soon as somebody quits smoking. So reducing the number of people who smoke is one of the most effective demand measurement tools that the NHS has. And it's also arguably probably one of the most tangible things that the NHS can do to reduce health inequalities. If we just kind of click onto the next, we need to recognize that smoking it's not just a lifestyle choice or a behavioral a behavior that people choose to do. It's an addiction, and the addiction has taken away that choice. Tobacco dependency is a long-term chronic relapsing condition. It normally starts in childhood and it's driven by nicotine addiction. And we need to treat it in the same way that we would treat any other long-term chronic condition, as a clinical responsibility with evidence-based and effective treatments. It was the Royal College of Physicians that said failure to identify and treat smoking is no less negligent than failure to identify and treat cancer. Next slide. So we've heard that there are over 250,000 people in West Yorkshire who are smoking. And the systematic identification of smokers and opt-out referral to in-house services during the inpatient period, as Sally talked about, really does have the potential to extend the reach of tobacco treatment and to reduce the overall smoking prevalence, as well as all of the positive health benefits for the individual. This slide is a pictorial representation of the inpatient tobacco dependency pathway across West Yorkshire when all of the 8 hospitals have been fully established, and we've used the NHS assumptions here. If we just click again, we can see that there is potential. Oh, sorry, go back one more. Sorry, there was an animation there, but we can see here that there's potential to identify and see nearly 1/5 of all smokers in West Yorkshire on an annual basis. And if we follow it through, we can see that there's potential for over 7,000 smokers to initiate a quit attempt in hospital and be referred for ongoing support in the community every single year. This is modelled on a 50-50 split between the pharmacy and the pharmacy and local authority services, although we do recognise that it may vary locally depending on patient choice and service provision. If we can go on to the next slide. So just to look at the transfer of care bit in a bit more detail, these attrition rates, they're based on assumptions from local authority stop smoking services and their generic referrals, their engagement, and then their quit rates. But arguably, we would expect to see higher engagement rates following transfer of care from the inpatient service. Patients in hospital, they've already engaged with support, they've already started their treatment, and they've already agreed to accept the offer of ongoing support in the community. There are opportunities to maximise the impact of the service. And this is a little equation that I borrowed from Sanjay Agrawal, who you may have come across. He's a respiratory consultant in Leicester and is the NHS England's National Specialty Advisor for Tobacco Dependency. In effect, it basically is that the impact is the sum of our reach times our effectiveness. And we can increase our reach by improving patient choice, improving the convenience with increased providers across the ICB and seamless transfers of care. This is important so that we don't lose people. That first conversation needs to set out that this is a follow-on from the treatment that was been initiated in hospital and that it needs to happen in a timely manner. We can also increase our effectiveness through the effective use of medication. Most people will relapse in the first week or so, and one of the main reasons for this is nicotine withdrawal, the symptoms and the cravings. But this is generally because people don't use medication correctly. They don't use the nicotine replacement therapy effectively. Generally, they underdose or they wait until they have a craving to then use it. So if we can encourage patients to use their medication more effectively to prevent the cravings, it will then become much more effective and we'll see more people quitting smoking. Next slide. So tobacco dependency is a chronic, it's a long-term chronic relapsing condition, and I'm emphasising the chronic relapsing part here, with the average smoker taking around about 30 attempts to quit smoking. And, recognising that as somebody who provides support, we do have to be realistic and acknowledge that not everybody is going to quit smoking the first time round. So we shouldn't be disheartened if people don't engage, if they ignore our calls, or even if they hide from us in the shop or the street. I really want to emphasize that, the treatment that we have for tobacco dependency, it is effective and it's evidence-based, especially if we compare it to the numbers needed to treat other conditions, such as prescribing statins or hypertensive treatment or cervical smear tests. But no one would suggest that we don't do those things. And again, I think just to kind of leave you, I wanted to leave you with a quote from Thomas Edison. I think it really, for me, reflects the chronic relapsing element of somebody's journey to become smoke-free. So I don't know if it's going to come up there. Yeah. So it's basically saying people don't fail. They just find ways that it doesn't work, but eventually they'll run out of ways of doing it wrong, and they will stop smoking. Thanks. I'll pass back on to Ruth.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you to Sally for that really good piece of information as to why there's an investment in the NHS, why the hospital trusts are taking the time to engage with people and decide and post them onto the service. Really helpful. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to go through the kind of community pharmacy element of the pathway. So from when the contact's made to that post-event messaging. Next slide, please. So the first thing I want to talk about is mental health patients. So you will have seen in the service specification, it talks about mental health patients and those with complex mental health conditions. I think it's really important that we kind of put into context what's meant by that, because it is not an exclusion for any patient who has mental health conditions. We need to make sure that the community pharmacy service is the right option for that patient. It's going to be the place where that person's going to have a more likely to successfully quit. It's where they want to go. There's no point in sending somebody where they don't want to go. So who really feels that community pharmacy is their choice, that is the right thing to do. And many people will choose community pharmacy because they already know you and your teams and they trust you. So I think there's a real good rationale to why people choose community pharmacy. And we already see people with mental health issues day in, day out. They're a core part of our patient base, so there's no reason really for us not to see them. So I just wanted to provide that kind of context. So the trust will take into consideration, those things around when, do they refer a patient with mental health issues, whether they be complex, however that's defined or not, into the community pharmacy. But to help support that, there is, we know there's some considerations that need to be taken into mind. So we have developed some considerations locally. It hasn't been completed as a document because it's still doing the rounds a little bit, but I'll go through some of the areas that the trust will kind of think about before they make a referral for a mental health patient. Next slide, please. So we've reminded them that the inclusion and exclusion criteria are what they are, and community pharmacies have to abide by them. How long somebody's been in hospital might well impact on where the most appropriate person to be is. We've been really clear, community pharmacy can only make, there can only be 12 weeks of entire support from the quit date to when to the 12 weeks later. So if they think somebody's going to need longer than that, community pharmacy isn't an appropriate place to make the referral because we cannot provide support beyond that 12 weeks. We've also talked about drug tobacco interactions. That's something we have to be careful of in community pharmacy too. So although actually there is NRT itself doesn't interact, stopping smoking does have some interactions. Best place to look at is at the SPS website. So the link is there, and it's also on Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire's website. And another consideration might be multiple addictions. So if somebody's managing multiple addictions, which can be really difficult, particularly if they're trying to stop smoking at the same time as reducing their methadone, for example, again, is community pharmacy the right place? But that will be discussed with the individual before the referral's made. So if you do get a referral from a mental health trust, which you will, please don't just think because the service spec refers to complex mental health patients that it means, oh, I can't deal with them, because actually you can, and you will be often the best place for that to happen. Next slide, please. Other considerations for the referrals and things that for you to be aware of from a community pharmacy perspective is the service specifications clear. This is for people 18 or over, and for people who have not already received 12 weeks of stop smoking support. And there are two things you have to think about when you first start the service, just to check that you're able and you're eligible to provide the service to the patient. Drug interaction should be checked. As I say, it's not with the NRT, it's often with the stop smoking, but there's a really great resource which we'll put the link onto there. And we've already heard from Sally about vapes and how vapes are sometimes used to help support a quit event. And you might be thinking, well, I can't supply vapes, so I can't help somebody who is on a vape. That isn't an exclusion. So we can't supply vapes through the community pharmacy service, but we can actually do that behavioural support for that individual. They will have to source their own vapes as part of that, but we can do the behavioural support to help their quit. And if that's what works for that individual, that's absolutely fine. Next slide, please. So we'll get the referrals. All referrals will be made via farm outcomes for most of our hospital trusts. Some haven't got that quite set up yet and using NHS Mail still, but many do seem to be planning to go to farm outcomes. And we know that that's going to be easier for you to kind of be alerted, but do bear in mind that you do need to check your NHS Mail address, because it's a terms of service for all community pharmacies. You may get referrals to Stop Smoking Service, and you might also get some CPCS referrals if other referral mechanisms have failed. So your first job is to contact the patient, and you're going to have 4 potential outcomes. The next slide, not yet, but the next slide will deal with when you manage to contact the patient and get that appointment sorted out with them. You may, however, find that you try to contact the patient and you're unable to do so. So we have to make 3 attempts to contact them. If we can't contact the patient after 3 attempts, that's the end of the service. You can try more times if you want, but you're not obliged to do so. Really important, though, that we do feed back to the hospital trust that you've made those 3 attempts, so that they know that that's what's happened, that patient is no longer being supported. You may contact the patient, get through to them, and they may then say to you, no, I don't want to be part of this service anymore. And as Sally said, there will have been a conversation. They will have chosen to be referred to community pharmacy. They'll have been chosen to be referred to your community pharmacy, but they may still have declined that referral. And if that's the case, and you can't convince them to try restart a quit attempt, then again, you just report that. But please ask them why, because I think what's really important in this process is feedback. So as Sally said, trusts have to report things back, but they also need to know what patients are telling you. So if lots of patients are saying one thing, it might help their advisors in the hospital actually cover that point with somebody before discharge, so that it reduces the risk of that happening again. And lastly, it might well be that you contact the patient and they say, actually, my circumstances have changed. You're not really a very convenient pharmacy anymore. You can then onward refer to another community pharmacy. There's a way of doing that through the farm outcomes. Yeah, you can refer on to a different pharmacy. So maybe they thought they were going to be discharged home, but they've been discharged to a relative's house and they would rather use a different pharmacy. Next slide, please. But let's assume that you get hold of your patient and then you're able to then book the appointment with them. So I'm going to go through generally what the consultation should include. Now, tonight's event is around the pathway. It is not around the training you've got to do to be the individual, either the pharmacist or the pharmacy technician who provides the stop smoking support. That's all in the service specification, which there's a link to later on the slides for you. So the consultation has 3 main elements: the carbon monoxide test to see where we are with that symptoms actually quit, the behavioural support element, and if appropriate necessary, supplying the person with their NRT. And these consultations, the distance between each of them is a maximum of 2 weeks at a time, but you can do them more frequently if that's what the patient wants, and that suits you both. And you know, it is very much around patient choice. You do need to record your outcomes on farm outcomes, and that's so you can keep that record, and it is free of charge for you to use farm outcomes. And we'll talk about notifications a little bit later on in a section later. And as with all our services, we've got to get patient consent. I'm not going to go into the details because I'm sure you've read them in the service specification, but they're on the slide there should you need them. Next slide, please. So to try and help, what we've done here is we've come up with a timeline of when the consultations can happen. I'm going to try, possibly badly, to try and explain it to you. So if I get something wrong, well, so one of the other people on the call, please put me right. So the date to quit is set. Now that for most people will be on their discharge date, but for some others, particularly if they've been in hospital for a while, it may actually be before the discharge date. And we've got to the clock, as it were, as in the support we can provide, is up to 12 weeks, and that is measured from the date of the quit. So for example, if somebody actually their quit date was a week before discharge and they were discharged, that would be counted as week 1. You then contact the individual and have your initial consultation, which may happen around between week 2 and 3, and then you quite quickly get to your week 4, your post quit date consultation. It could be that you get 4 weeks because the person's discharged and quit at the same time. You'll then get your first consultation, you know, maybe between week 1 and 2, maybe another one around week 3, and then you'll do your 4-week quit. So it's really quite flexible when these consultations happen. The bit that isn't flexible is they're a maximum of 2 weeks apart. You have your initial consultation, and then there's interim consultations. They don't, there is a little bit of difference, but not really. It's about that carbon monoxide validation, the behavioural support, and ongoing NRT supply. The 4-week post-quit date consultation does need to record the outcome of where we are at 4 weeks, because that is that is what the hospital trust and, in fact, community pharmacy is going to be measured on. So there's going to be some potential outcomes here. So the first one is they have successfully quit. Somebody's quit, which is brilliant news, and discharged. And that's because somebody doesn't want to, no, I don't want to come for any ongoing support. So I think we should offer that, because we know if we can get ongoing support for up to 12 weeks, that person's more likely to stay quit. But some people may not want to do that, so they can be discharged from the service, and that's where the service ends. Somebody may wish to continue that support. They've quit, they want to continue, and they will continue to see the pharmacy advisor for 12 weeks from the date of quit. It could be they failed a quit attempt, and as Joanna pointed out, that is a very common outcome of this. We want to see everybody quit, but that is not a possibility. So, if somebody does quit, it's around discharging from the service, but making sure they know that they can try a quit attempt at any time they're ready to do so, and let them know the support they have to be able to do that. And indeed, you can offer them to restart their quit attempt if they want to do so, and so signpost them to a locally commissioned service to do that if they want to do that. So hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of an outline. So there's no hard and fast rules around when these consultations happen. It's around what suits the patient, but they must be a maximum of 2 weeks apart, and they can continue until 12 weeks from the date of quit, noting that won't necessarily be 12 weeks from within the pharmacy service, and also so it's that 12 weeks from the quit date. So yeah, that's going to really vary as to how long somebody's been at home and when their quit date was. Next slide, please. So post-event messaging, we've talked about this several times. This is really key and it's really important. There's a helpful flow diagram as one of the appendices in the service specification. So we've put a copy of that in there for you. As Sally said, the trust are obliged to report to NHSC, so they need to know what's happened to their patients following that transfer of care on discharge. Can we go to the next slide, please? Because the table, I think, on the next slide notifies, I think clearly says when we've got to do that notification. So there's several points in the service when we need to notify both the trust and the GP. So let's start with the trust notification. So currently, using farm outcomes, the trust notification is not enabled automatically through farm outcomes. We are very hopeful that will happen, and there are conversations nationally to make that happen, but currently it doesn't. So you will need to manually download the notification from farm outcomes and send it by email to the trust. The trust email addresses are being circulated, and they're going to be on Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire's website. So if you can't find them, that's where they'll be. But they should hopefully be on the notification you get when the person's discharged. So we need to notify the trust that the patient doesn't engage with the service and the reason why. That the patient has engaged with the service, so they know that actually that's been a referral that's then been picked up and that person's being supported. They'll need to know that 4-week outcome, so is that person quit or not, and all the details that you need to include are in the annex of the service specification. And the final outcome, which may be at 12 weeks, or if somebody leaves the service after 8 weeks, might be after 8 weeks. So basically the final outcome either at 12 weeks or before. There's also an obligation to notify GP practices, but this is done through farm outcomes in the usual manner. So for most of our practices, it'll be automated and sent to them by an NHS mail. If there's a failure in that, you'll get a notification from Farm Outcomes to tell you you've got to print it out manually and then send it by NHS mail to the practice, but that doesn't happen very often. So the practice needs to know the person's engaged with the service. And the reason that's important is that that initial engagement one will include whether you've supplied NRT or not. So the practice is aware that NRT is being supplied and that person's undergoing a supported quit. And also the final outcome, whether that be at 4 weeks, 12 weeks, or anywhere in between. So, you know, really important. As I say, we know it's not ideal. The trust notification is not automated. There is work going on to make that happen. But at the moment, you will need to do that manually and make sure you have a process set up to do so. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into the payments because I'm sure you've all seen those in the service specification, but just to outline the fees that are there that you claimed via MYS, and there's an API in place to help do that, so that should make that simpler for you as possible. So do make sure you claim promptly for all your things, because there is time frames and cut-offs. We don't want you to do work that you're not then funded for. I think that's enough on that slide. So next slide, please. So I'm now going to hand back to Nicola, who's going to give you a little bit of information around the service so far, what we've seen, some of the learning and some of the work that goes on to make sure that this is a success and to help support you and your teams in delivering the service.
Thank you, Ruth. So some of the positive feedback we've had so far from some of the pharmacies that are delivering this service currently and finding it really great and getting some rewarding feeling from looking after the patient. So we've had the service is good and works well in terms of the referral and claims process. The training required for those planning on offering the service was felt to be really good and informative. And the fact that pharmacy technicians are now able to also provide the service is really helpful in terms of capacity and accessibility for the patient. So that's really positive and nice to see some people are finding some good reasons to deliver the service. So some of the challenges we're finding along the way, and maybe hopefully some either reasons why or some solutions for you. So the patient is too ill to visit the pharmacy for their consultation. So we do have to remember that these patients have just come out of hospital. So home visits are not within the service spec, but remote support is included. So it is accepted that where a patient chooses remote support, that the pharmacy isn't able to carry out the CO monitoring, so that it would be an option for either the whole of the service or even part of the service up until that patient does feel well enough to visit the pharmacy that it can be carried out remotely. Some pharmacies are feeding back that the patients saying the pharmacy that they've chosen is too far from where they live. So the trust does check when with the patient when they're being discharged, which is their preferred pharmacy. But again, if you are finding that a patient is saying that it's a little bit too far, remote support is available. But please do feedback to the trust. If that is the feedback you're getting, it's important that the trust understand that, so they really can maybe go a little bit extra in terms of explaining to the patient where that pharmacy is and really making sure that the patients understand where it is they're meant to be going for their service when they leave hospital. We're getting feedback that sometimes it feels like the patient is not ready to stop smoking, doesn't wish to engage in the service. So the patient has set a quit date and is currently not smoking as they leave on discharge for the referral. So if you find that the patient either doesn't want to engage or sort of says that they don't know what you're talking about and isn't aware that they've been referred in, please again do feedback to the trust, because I'm sure they'll be really interested to review themselves whether they're explaining to the patient in the right way, or whether that is just a natural sort of dropout rate that we see with people with this sort of service. We might also then see patients wishing to self-refer into this service. And as we know and we've established this evening, this service is just for those patients that are leaving hospital, but there are other services for patients that want to self-refer in for smoking cessation services. So we've talked quite a bit this evening about the importance of that post-event messaging. Ruth highlighted a really easy visual table, which summarised it really well. Not going to read through this entire slide, but I guess in terms of big asks from this evening and the hints and tips to make it a success, in terms of the referrals that have come in so far to community pharmacy, this is the bit wet that we're not quite getting right yet on the whole. So really think about that. If you've not yet started delivering the service, or even if you are, really go back and think about, are we getting this part of the service right? And review your process, and whether it's through the NHS mail or farm outcomes, please do just have a little look at that. And then ensure readiness to deliver the service. So the service spec came out quite a long time ago now, and a lot of you may have done the training and been ready to start delivering. Some of you may have lost members of staff since that time. So are you still ready to deliver that service? If you're not, you've got two options. You can either put some time in to get ready to deliver that service, get your training done, put a plan in place, and be ready to accept those patients. And if that isn't what you want to do, then please do consider deregistering from the service, because you will get those referrals, and it's going to take a lot of work for us to sort of chase up where those patients have got to and support making sure that those patients do get referred onwards to a pharmacy that is able to deliver that service for the patient. Please consider in terms of your team setup, if you need multiple technicians or pharmacists ready to deliver the service as well, because obviously we do need to be able to deliver the service all the time. So don't forget, the Trust Tobacco Dependency Advisors at the Trust are more than welcome to support. So if you have got any questions, there are going to be contact details within these slides. So there are people to help if you need it as you're delivering the service. So the next few slides are additional information that hopefully will help you with planning for your service and getting it up and running, or even if you are up and running and having teething problems, lots of useful resource and bits and bobs there to support. There's Ruth's email address and my email address. So any questions, any concerns, you can come to either of us for support. So, any questions? Don't forget, you might need to unmute yourself. Or you can put it in your chat if you don't want to speak.
Nicola, there is one question in the chat from Fiona, and Fiona says, with the exclusion criteria of not already having received 12-week support, does this mean they cannot be re-referred? So I'm trying to unpick quite what you're asking, Fiona. If you are able to come off mute and ask us directly, that would be helpful. But in the meantime, I will fill the gap. So that 12 weeks is very much set. If somebody it has a failed quit attempt, they then have to be referred on to a local authority commission service. So you may, as a pharmacy, provide that, or it might be that that's provided by the local authority. Again, you have the information on your website, don't you, Nicola, and under the signposting section for the stop smoking services. So this very much is that this is around the person the care being transferred from the hospital trust, it might be mental health trust as well, into the community pharmacy. If they fail, they can retry, but it would be through a local authority route. I hope, Fiona, that's answered it for you, but if not, please put something in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just more if, like, you know, if they went back into hospital and then got another re-referral, whether they could do it again through community pharmacy, or whether they did have to go elsewhere.
I don't know if somebody else has got the answer to that, but I would imagine that it's a you quit. Steve.
Sorry, yes, I certainly picked that one up. Absolutely. Each and every time a smoker is admitted to a trust, they have the ability to be referred into this service. So if they were in 2 months ago and they had support but they didn't make it, absolutely they can be referred into this service or the locally commissioned service again.
Okay, so then so even if they have it before and they've had the 12 weeks, they could do it again if they're re-referred like that? Absolutely.
There's no restriction at all on the number of times an individual can be referred into this service. It's basically each and every time they're admitted. If they've been unsuccessful in the past, it doesn't exclude them at all from getting support in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions from anybody? You're being very quiet tonight. Shall I turn that around then? As you know, it'd be helpful to know. You can put it into the chat. Are you providing the stop smoking service? So if people could put in the chat that they're providing it, and has anybody actually had any patients and want to share any of their experiences of the service? Give you all a moment to put something into the chat as to where you're up to, or you maybe a pharmacy that's listening in tonight thinking, I wonder whether I want to sign up to this service. I think we've certainly heard the benefit, you know, it has to our communities and our people, and the impact that that has on them.
Yeah, Ruth, could I just add something in terms of the referral into your service on discharge? As we all know, if you're an acute inpatient, your stay can be anything from a few hours to a few days. And there will be patients who are admitted and discharged, particularly over the weekend, who won't have been able to see a tobacco dependency advisor during that admission. Generally, the TDA's funding is such at the moment that it's a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday service. However, when the tobacco dependency team can come in on Monday morning, they will be able to see who's been admitted and discharged, and whether or not they were smokers. And they can ring them at that point and actually have a conversation with them, and they can still refer them into your service if the patient says yes, even though they haven't been supplied with NRT, so they haven't actually quit at that point. They can still be referred. So there will be a number of patients potentially who will have a referral through to you who haven't yet stopped. Your initial supply of NRT, if they agree to the support, will be the first time you see them. And the quit date at that point will be that first appointment and that first occasion with which they're provided with NRT. So that's just another slightly more unusual, but absolutely real world way in which you might receive a number of patients.
Thanks, Steve. I can see in the chat that Raj has put in around he's providing through the council service. I think you've later clarified you're looking forward to doing the NHS service. So these are two very separate services. So the patients that on discharge are transferred to community pharmacy have the advanced stop smoking service that is different to the local authority service that you may or may not provide in the pharmacy. So you can't swap the two things around. One can only be provided when somebody's in the community, and the other can only be provided following discharge. So just to be clear on that too. So just to give, there's nothing else in the chat, so if there's nothing else that anybody's got to ask a question, that's fine. You've got our contact details. If you think about something, do let us know, and please do ask. Much rather people ask questions than sit there wondering as to what the answer is. In West Yorkshire, we're really keen to make this a success, and part of that is the people that you've heard talking tonight. We have a meeting every other week to talk about the stop smoking service. We talk about what's working well, we talk about what's not working well, we look at what resources and support we need to put in place. So we're doing quite a lot of work in the background to try and help A, get those referrals to you in community pharmacy, and B, help you in community pharmacy in making a success and getting as many people through this service to successfully quit as possible. Yeah, I want to say thank you very much to those people that are part of that group, because it's been really positive, and I think we've worked through quite a few issues and we've managed to pull together. And thank you very much to Danny, who supports that group, for doing the slides for tonight. They were brilliant. I also want to say thank you to you as a community pharmacy teams for the great work you do with everything, but including the stop smoking service. And my last thanks is to Community Pharmacy West Yorkshire for hosting this event, because they did all the registrations for you, they've put it all on, they've come to support it. So without them, this event wouldn't have happened. So thank you very much to Nicola and to your team. I'll hand back to you, Nicola.
Thank you, Ruth. So yeah, I was also going to say thank you to all the community pharmacies already delivering the service, and I look forward to seeing those of you that choose to sign up after this event thank you to everybody that's supported in terms of getting us ready for this event. And thank you to you guys for coming out and the event this evening. It's been lovely to see you all. We won't keep you any longer because it's getting late enough and it's already dark with it being October now. So I'll see you all soon and good luck with your service. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.